One of the things that makes Replicator like an exciting thing to partner with the government about is that it was not industry telling the government what they need. It was the government going out to the services. It was the government going out to the combatant commands and saying, what do you need? What production ready capability do you need that would meet this intent? And those conversations, those need statements are coming from the end user communities.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley.
In late 2023, Deputy Secretary of Defense Kath Hicks announced a new initiative called Replicator. It's an effort to accelerate the production and delivery at scale of what's known as all-domain attritable autonomy, or ADA2 systems. A few weeks ago, the Pentagon announced their first buy in the Replicator Initiative. It's AeroVironment's Switchblade, a loitering munition that's been around for years and most recently has seen significant action in the Ukrainian battlefield. We caught up with AeroVironment's Director of Business Development, Kara Kramer, to talk about the current product pipeline, the Replicator win, the future of the program, and all things autonomy. Enjoy. All right, everyone. We're excited to be joined by Kara Kramer today. Kara is the Director for Business Development at AeroVironment for the Air Force, for DIU, and for non-DoD accounts. So, Kara, thank you so much for making time. Busy time for you all. Big win.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting time, and I'm glad to be here today.
Hot off the presses, the announcement that AeroVironment is the first company selected for the notorious Replicator Initiative. We're going to talk a lot about it, but I want to start even backing up because I think folks have probably may have heard of Replicator, this initiative to get a whole bunch of attritable unmanned systems into the hands of DoD users rapidly. They may have heard of some of these other drone companies. AeroVironment, not exactly a startup, right? Public company formed in 1971. Tell us a little bit about what the company is and what you all do.
Sure, I'd be happy to do it. I mean, you summed it up great. We're publicly traded, and we've been a company for over 50 years, but we're still pretty small. We're the kind of size company where it's pretty normal to know folks across the entire company, but we're still churning out some pretty exciting innovations. So the way that we think about autonomous systems, we think about it as a family of systems. And so when you start to look at what AeroVironment's made, it goes from sub-launched all the way to the surface of Mars, because we made the Mars Ingenuity helicopter. So we're covering a wide swath of arenas with what we're doing. And it's a really exciting place to be, because sometimes when you're at companies, it feels like they don't know who they want to be when they grow up. But it feels like this company knows exactly what their passion is, and their passion is autonomous systems, and everything that we're doing is just pushing that further and pushing more capabilities out to the warfighter.
It's very cool. So autonomous systems is the thread that ties together the different initiatives in the company. And it's funny, you talk about a company that knows what it wants to be. You've worked at some startups, now you're at least bigger in terms of the history of performance. What's that like? You're coming from a background. I mean, tell everybody a little bit about your story, because it's pretty unique, the perspective that you have.
So yeah, happy to start with that. So I started my career in the government service. And so I went directly into government service after finishing graduate school. And then by ways of marrying into the military, I started supporting the Department of Defense instead of working in the intelligence community. And doing that is when I started to realize how programs are made, how contracts are won, and got really interested in how I could better support those functions at companies I was working at. So I've worked at, the really big companies like Booz Allen Hamilton, and I've worked at companies where we're all still using our personal Gmails to try to get a SAM.gov registration set up, because we haven't bought the domain yet for the company. So by doing that full gamut, it's given me a really good appreciation for the fact that it is always hard to win contracts, whether you're at a behemoth company that everybody knows your name, or whether or not you're at a company that you have to explain what the name means every time you talk to somebody. It's still always going to be hard, but it's always going to be rewarding when you do it. The current job I'm at right now is exciting because we have so many really mature products. And so there's no cap on what you can do short of, your supply chain is the only thing that's going to hold you back. There's no real limit on what you can do with such a family of systems in order to be able to offer it to your customers.
Yeah, it's a good segue because a lot of products, you talked about AeroVironment being focused on autonomy. The drone industry has been kind of interesting, right? It's not actually a new industry. People have been building unmanned systems for quite some time. And yet today in 2024, it kind of feels like we're at a new moment. There's new attention. There's new focus. There's new interest in these systems. Why today are drones such a focus area to the point where you have the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Defense making this the priority for the department?
It's a great insight because my viewpoint is that we wouldn't be all talking about unmanned systems or uncrewed systems, whichever phrase we're using. You wouldn't be doing that if there hadn't been the conflict in Ukraine. I read an article, forgive me, I can't cite where I read it, but they refer to drones as the new IEDs. So similar to that paradigm shift we had in Iraq and Afghanistan, when the IED threat came out, we realized that you could have these quickly put together kinetic capabilities that were just a fraction of the cost of the systems that are going to put them against. And drones in Ukraine are the same way, where, you're just seeing this rise in, FPV drones, but you're also seeing that even a drone like a Switchblade can take out a target that is worth exponentially more than the Switchblade was. And it's a paradigm shift for how we've traditionally thought about war, where you have these exquisite systems that cost, millions of dollars, and they take out a target that's worth millions of dollars. And so I think that's why we're all starting to look at that. And the autonomy technology has been, rapidly getting better and better and easier to use. And so the more that bar is lowered on ease of use, I think the more you're going to see on the battlefield.
Ukraine certainly has driven a lot of experimentation. It's gotten a lot of these systems actually onto the battlefield in ways that they weren't before. And you mentioned, the product that you all have now been awarded Replicator, the first Replicator tranche for, which is Switchblade. Tell folks about what makes this product unique. What is the Switchblade, and how did it get to the point where that's the first buy?
Sure. So Switchblade it's a fairly unique platform because it's a drone that, if you use it right, it isn't coming back. So it is by its nature a one-way use. And so we have a Switchblade 300 that is an anti-personnel. It's what's called a loitering munition. So it's not where your target has to be exactly in the right spot. It can loiter and wait for a period of time until the target is in the right spot. And then the Switchblade 600 is an anti-armor variant. It's much larger, and that's able to take out the Russian tanks. If you ever have free time or a sense of curiosity, you can go to YouTube and you can look up videos and see how they're being used in Ukraine and see what an impact that can make. And if you ever come to any of the trade shows, we usually have them on the floor, and folks love to see them in person and realize that it's pretty cool to see that and realize the difference it can make on the battlefield. And then being able to pick it up in your hands for the Switchblade 300 is when you start to realize that, hey, you could just put a few of these in your pack. They're not that heavy. They're not that big, but it provides this flexibility of kinetics in that battlefield environment that, we've just had continuous demand for it ever since, developing the system years ago.
And that was my next question is when did the system first come onto the scene, and what were other environments where it was deployed, or has it really kind of just been in warehouses until now in Ukraine?
No, the 300 was used pretty extensively in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think one of the most common stories I hear from customers is, I used to use your system when I was serving in Iraq. I used to use your system when I was serving in Afghanistan. And that's not just Switchblade. There's a lot of Puma operators or Raven operators that they know our company because they used to hold our product in their hand in the battlefield.
So you have that track record of performance. Folks are familiar with the brand, making it, a more logical choice as things kind of scale. Super cool. You mentioned something, Kara. You said autonomy kind of spans across the organization. You all are a product organization. Tell us, for folks who don't know much about AeroVironment as a company, how is it organized? Is it a kind of an engineering shop where everybody is technical? Is it organized into product families? How all do you meet the mission?
That's a great question. So we're organized by what we call business areas. So we have loitering munition systems, or LMS. That's where all the Switchblade family is going to be in that part. We have our medium UAS or MUAS. That's going to be your Jump 20, your T-20. Those are going to be your Group 3 size systems. And then we have SUAS, which is all the small UAS. So that's going to be your Puma, your Vapor 55MX. And then we have a pretty exciting division called MacCready Works. So Paul MacCready was the founder of our company. We wanted to be able to preserve some of that scientific exploration, prototyping spirit into MacCready Works. And so MacCready Works is, similar to Skunk Works, right? Where you're going to be doing rapid prototyping, but very, very focused on our own product. So it's not about trying to create something that doesn't currently exist. It's more about how could you take our products and maybe combine high TRL elements together and rapidly meet a requirement that was brought to us by one of our mission partners.
Super cool. No, thanks for that rundown. I think the Skunk Works or the innovation inside a large organization, and y'all aren't even that large, but innovation inside an organization is always an interesting kind of thing to study and see how folks do it differently. So super cool. Appreciate the laydown. All right, let's get into the meat of this conversation, which is I know a lot of listeners are so curious. Y'all won this Replicator tranche. Folks have been curious about this program for a long time. And by a long time, we mean a couple of months since it was first announced. Tell us, Kara, how did you all first find out about Replicator? Did the government come to you as they were shaping it? Did you find out about it with everyone else? Like, what was the lead up to it?
We found out about it when CATHIX announced it on early August of 2023, which, to be honest, I think is when most of industry found out about it. Like, the idea behind it is not novel. It wasn't like no one had been talking about or thinking about mass at scale, especially when you're looking at our peer or near peer adversaries and knowing their capabilities. It's always been a topic. When it was announced, when it was named Replicator, we learned about it during that announcement.
So you hear about this thing at the announcement. What's your first thought? How does the organization mobilize to take advantage of this moment?
I think the first things you do are you do the research, you talk to other folks in industry, you talk to folks at downtown DC, and you start to piece together what else can you expect to come out of it, and what kind of money are we talking about here? All of those questions that the industry starts talking to each other about. We start talking to folks in the government, and it's almost like an intelligence challenge where you're starting to piece together all of these tidbits, and some of them conflict and some of them align, but you have to try to figure out where the source information is all coming from. So there was a period of time when it was first announced where there was just a lot of unknowns about it. And I think everybody in industry felt that. But honestly, I think anytime the DoD wants to do something like Replicator, when they want to move fast, there is going to be, industry is going to have to play a little catch-up game to catch up with the government. And that's part of, move fast and break things. And so in my opinion, it is okay to go through a period of time of being like, I don't really fully understand this. And it's also okay, 6 months later, to still feel like there's some parts of this I don't understand, because some parts are classified. So if you don't understand, it may just be because you haven't gotten the read in yet and you don't need to know.
Or you got to ask different questions to different folks, right? It's a part of this is we talk about this a lot in kind of the defense innovation world, to the extent that that's a thing of, you got to do the work, right? The government is not, this is not just the same as every industry. Everything is not going to be wrapped up and packaged with a bow. You got to go out and do that customer discovery and have those conversations and develop those relationships. And so there was a little bit of, discussion, I think, right around when this was first announced of, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is the government announced something and it's not fully baked. And a lot of folks were upset about that. And at the same time, we've all been saying we got to go faster on these things, work with industry and figure it out. And so this was sort of an example of doing that, right? Of saying, hey, here's the intent. We want to do something like this. We want to go buy large volumes of these attritable systems. We know we need that. We don't know exactly all the different pieces, but we know we want to kind of reprogram money and make this happen and make it happen fast. And so the fact that they're now following on and starting that seems like a good thing. I want to keep pulling this thread, Kara, because this is the magic of this show. Is like, how does a campaign come about? How does the win happen? How does a company get to scale in something that matters? And so you all go do this research. You find out the program exists. What was for you all the next step? Did the government kind of reach out with a solicitation? Was there an RFP drop? What actually happened to make this a program or an initiative that you could engage with?
So I think, from where I sit, one of the things that makes Replicator like an exciting thing to partner with the government about is that it was not industry telling the government what they need. It was the government going out to the services. It was the government going out to the combatant commands and saying, what do you need? What production ready capability do you need that would meet this intent? And those conversations, those need statements are coming from the end user communities at that point. That's, I think, to me, is more pure of what the warfighter needs. And that's been sort of the underpinning of what we've seen in Replicator. So to the best of my understanding, that's one of the most unique parts of Replicator is how connected it is to what the services and the commands and what they need.
I mean, that's really cool, right? Like an actual requirements collection process that reflects I think this is another common theme, is how do you close the gap between the folks who are spending the money and the folks who are doing the mission and make sure that one is informing the other. It sounds like that actually did happen here. What can you share about the actual solicitation process? So once government kind of knew what it needed, to kind of just put that out publicly, to talk to some subset of companies, how did that process work?
So I can't get into too many details, but what I can share is that it was not a solicitation that came out on SAM.gov. And a lot of these, they did, to my viewpoint, did extensive due diligence, the government did, where they weren't going to just ask a company, tell us about your widget. They're going to go and talk to people who are using it currently, and they're going to get a lot of, objective insights into how your product works and what the company is like to work with. You could put out an RFP tomorrow and you could get, 30, 35 responses telling you that, their technology is a TRL 8 and they're at a manufacturing readiness level of 8 as well, but they've never scaled before or something like that. And you then have to make some risk determinations. And the better way probably to go and talk to people who are actually using it and say, how's this working for you? If it isn't working, what does the company do? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate the distinction. It's a good one. It's another guest of the show has talked about technical readiness level versus manufacturing readiness level. And you alluded to one of the key delimiters for this initiative was production ready capability. Explain to our listeners, what is manufacturing readiness level? And then what do you think the government meant by production ready in this environment?
So DIU had their DIU Prime solicitation came out in January, and they're saying that's part of Tranche 1. And the P and the R for Prime stand for production ready. It's been a real, I think, one of the most consistent focus areas of the first tranche Replicator is a production ready. And the way I've heard that defined is it's either something that's about to go into production or something that's already in production. And so in our case, we're producing the Switchblades, hundreds a month out of our Simi Valley, California facility for both the 300 and the 600. And so it's non-slide deck that we're just going to put in front of you and show you. You can actually come and you can walk the floor. You can see them putting it together. I would say you could reach out and touch it, but you're not allowed to do that. But you can come and look and see what we're doing. And so that manufacturing readiness level is talking about that. There's obviously more to it. It's also about being able to study risk across your supply chain and predict long lead items and make sure that you are positioned for the scale that you are planning on hitting. So there's a much deeper engineering level answer for what makes manufacturing readiness for good to go. But for a lot of startups that have really exciting technologies, there's always going to be some risk around investing in that when they haven't scaled anything before. Because there's a big difference between the engineering that goes into creating this exciting widget and the engineering that goes into getting it to be manufactured where it's coming out at a repeatable quality and that you're meeting all of your shipping targets on time.
Absolutely. And we've had, plenty of guests on this show who've talked about that 0 to 1 journey of something, existing tomorrow didn't exist yesterday. And doing the work today to get that user group aligned to kind of help you build it. There's absolutely a place for it. And what's so crucial is once you've got that thing that works, how do you actually get that to a level where now it starts to matter for the mission at scale, for where multiple people are using it. And so understanding that this program, this conversation is really about that second part, which is you all had something that and Switchblade in many ways was probably already at scale, but now it's just a whole new spotlight that you all have shined on you and on this capability. From a contracting standpoint, I'm curious what was the vehicle that the government is actually using for this? Is it an existing contract that you all already had, where it was just kind of a modification? Is it a new contract, or is it some combination of the two?
So I can say that our Tranche 1 we're in partnership with the Army for that one. And we already had an existing effort called LASSO. That's all I can say on that one, but I think one of the priorities for this is going not just production ready, but to be scalable, contracting is going to be a part of that, because anybody who's in this game knows that sometimes that could be the hardest part. It can be harder than actually making the tech. It can be getting it on contract and getting that contract set up in a way that isn't going to impede your performance later, but actually enable it.
Yeah. So that's the key point, right? For folks, I think this is about, when we talk about contract vehicles, it's not as important as revenue when you have nothing. And this is the path for when a government makes a decision, when resources become available, when you have those vehicles available, that's how money gets moved so that you can actually take advantage of a moment like this, where, you don't have to wait another, whatever it is, 60, 90, 120 days to get a new contract vehicle in place. I think it's an interesting insight. Kara, you've been through a lot of government acquisition initiatives at a whole variety of organizations of different sizes. How does this one compare? For you, what's unique and different? What's kind of still the same and similar? I'm just kind of curious, as you reflect on what this initial tranche experience has been like, how it compares to past experiences.
It's been unique because for other government initiatives, I'm working with one part of the government. Even if you think about the example of AFWorks and coming out with the open topic for SIPR and SITR, that was pretty revolutionary at the time, but did not have this incredibly specific topic that was seeded a year ago by some other small business. But being able to actually bring something novel, that was across the Department of Air Force. And so you were working across that department and trying to share understanding about what open topic meant and get their buy-in as an end user or customer. But this one is much faster and it has much less defined processes. There's no portal you can go to read about Replicator. And I think that's by design, because it's giving the government the freedom to be able to move quickly, because anyone who's worked in the government knows it's not quick to get documentation routed and approved and pushed out for press. And so even on the DIU site, it's been, it's fairly short when it says this is all the information about Replicator. I would have to guess that alone, getting those few paragraphs probably took weeks, if not months of staffing to get that approved to be put out. We're not just trying to improve acquisition processes. We're trying to improve our readiness for the future fight here. So, some level of discretion and secrecy is involved that I have not personally experienced before.
Yeah, that's astute. That's an interesting insight, even around just the kind of the amount of information flowing around this one. Kara, I know you can't really talk about, okay, why did we win? But what I am curious about is, what did AeroVironment do to put the company in a position to take advantage of something like this? We talked about contract vehicles as one thing. You had that existing vehicle. What are the other things that you had done, either deliberately or just happened to be, in the right place at the right time, that positioned you all to take advantage of this?
I mean, I think we have quite a few of our systems are currently in use in Ukraine. And that's a factor where we have data on how they're being used, and they're being used by soldiers who were not raised in the TTPs of the American military and have an MOS that allows them to operate a Puma. So you're seeing our systems used by folks that didn't have that classic training background, but you're also seeing them used in an environment that is some pretty gnarly GPS denied action going on. And so that allows us to do that iterative quick turn cycle to be able to push out these improvements and get this feedback loop that has really brought a lot of innovation and product improvement into what we're making.
Yep. That's no, thank you. Thanks for that. And how do you all think about the kind of the future here? You think this is a one and done? You think this is something that y'all are looking to scale? How do you think about this particular initiative?
I don't think it's one and done. I don't think anybody knows exactly what every focus area of the future tranches will be. But I think the two words that they're already using, like the all domain attritable autonomy, I think that will be the consistent factor across the future tranches. And that describes our entire portfolio here at AB. So I have to expect that we'll continue to support, maybe not with just Switchblades, maybe there'll be other aspects of our portfolio involved, but I don't see it being a one and done deal.
It's a bright future for AeroVironment. What about the new product pipeline? Because it sounds like you all have an existing kind of group of products that are really well positioned. How do you all think about building new products versus just kind of continuing to sell the ones that you've got?
So we have some exciting new products that will be, unveiled soon. And then one of the things that I really like that we do is we also try to think about how can we push out improvements onto products our customers already own. So one of the things we just released is an Autonomy retrofit kit. There are thousands of Pumas or Ravens already purchased by the military in both domestic and internationally. And it was the question was, well, then how could you bring today's autonomy into these older systems without making them have to buy a brand new one? And so we have, a simple upgrade that we can push out as one time and brings in that autonomy. So we're thinking about it in terms of not just what's the next new system that we want people to buy, which we're excited to unveil those. Some of them are competition sensitive, but they'll be very exciting when they come out publicly, as well as how can we take the fact that you already own X amount of Pumas and Ravens, and maybe you'd like to be able to add some autonomy to those so you can reduce that operator fatigue, and then you can move away from that 1-to-1 ratio if you want for your ISR mission.
There it is. So, and that's primarily a software kit, or that's a hybrid hardware and software kit?
It's a hybrid hardware and software kit.
So kind of upgrading existing systems, always cheaper than buying net, or not always cheaper, but usually cheaper than buying net new.
100% cheaper than buying new.
Good deal. Kara, your background, right? We alluded to it up front. You've been at startups like Shift 5, like Astari Digital, now at AeroVironment. What do you think newer companies could learn from the AeroVironment experience? Or if you were going back in that direction, what are some of the lessons that you'd take that you think would be useful there?
I think I would fit those neatly into two bins. One is, I think, a word that you hear startup founders using all the time, but it's still very hard to do, is the word focus, is making sure that you usually start around a core product, but then you'll get business development we call bluebirds, where they just fly out of the bush and capture your attention. And you get a lot of bluebirds when you're a new startup and you have flashy new tech. And, well, can it do X? Well, if I paid you, could it do Y? And as you start to go and fork your product and going down all of these avenues, is like maintaining that focus so that you can actually deliver on that core product that you had at first. That, I think, is one of the biggest challenges at newer companies. It's not a challenge at a big company, but it's a little bit easier institutionally to be able to say, no, that doesn't align, because you're not chasing after every piece. You're not trying to stay alive. You're not trying to validate your company to VCs. So what do little companies need to learn from the big, but then what can the big companies learn from the little? If I gave you a nickel for every time somebody's told me I worked on X team, which is basically like a startup, so I understand how startups think, you'd really enjoy that check, because I've been told that a lot. But the truth of the matter is that big companies, they don't think like startups. Some of it's good because it's easier to turn down work that doesn't fit at a big company, because it's not going to be what makes or breaks you. But you also can get stuck in your own processes and you can't move as quickly. Anyone at a large company can tell you, in business development, trying to get through your gates to get a proposal done, it's not a simple, easy, fast process. And sometimes when you're looking at cutting edge or defense innovation, they want you to move at a pace that is painfully fast for big companies. These big companies are just not designed to be able to turn a solicitation in 2 weeks. You could argue that maybe the DoD doesn't want solicitations that have been turned in 2 weeks, but they are still asking for it. So that's painful. It's a lot easier to move really fast at a startup.
Yeah. So speed to execution. Incentives are just different, right? In a large company, you have more to lose. It's more of the compliance, more of the regulation, more of the what are the downsides of doing this? We're in a startup. You're starting from a base of not very much. So the risk it's mostly upside, right? Versus downside. I'm curious, in your own career, like, are you going to go, what do you think? Is it big company, small company? What's better fit for you? Or are you going to continue to have kind of portfolio of both?
I've jokingly referred to myself as Goldilocks, where I've been at companies, I'm like, no, this is too big. And I've been at startups, I'm like, this is too small. And AV feels like the just right. We're less than 1,500 employees. I mean, as of today, we have a $5 billion market cap. So we have some heft to us as well. So this one feels like just the right size.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm sure the announcement didn't harm your stock price, which is cool.
It did not, actually.
If other companies that are maybe curious about this initiative that are like, man, how did AeroVironment pull this off? You don't want them to come take your share of the pie, but let's assume this pie is going to grow. What should companies who want to play in this world, whether it's Replicator or just autonomy writ large, like what are some of the things they should be thinking about?
I finally did remember what my second piece was, trying to get directive requirements. Okay, and then the second piece that startups can learn from big companies is to work backwards from requirements. Most of the time when large businesses are looking at innovation, they don't want to invest in innovation unless there's a customer requirement. There's a tendency in startups where you want to create the widget and then you want to bring it to them because you know that they need it. Like maybe you came out of that org or used to wear a uniform and you are sure that this is what they need, but that does not make the requirement exist. No requirement, then it's really hard to plan money in the POM for it. And that's where you're going to have a lot of those valley of death attrition of your products, is because if you don't have the requirement in mind when you develop your product, it's going to be an uphill battle, not impossible, but an uphill battle to get it across that valley.
So without giving away all the trade secrets, Kara, if another company is interested in competing on Replicator, or let's say just interested in being a major player in autonomy, I'm curious what lessons you would share with them.
I think the lessons I would share with them is to just keep getting feedback from your end user and your customer communities, because there's no uniformity or homogenous view on what autonomy is needed across the Department of Defense. There's autonomy that one unit may need that another doesn't. So if you're getting consistent, not right fits, obviously maybe rethink, but most of the time you just need to talk to to other parts of the government, because it's a wide swath and there's no one right fit. I think one of the advantages we'll have in the future fights and what Replicator is enabling is not a totally vertically integrated autonomy. We need a whole variety of vendors involved, because when one might fall, the other may stay. It needs to not be a homogenized autonomy out on the battlefield where one vendor, there's one ring to rule them all, right? You need it to be. We all saw how that movie ended when the ring was destroyed and the whole nation fell. We don't want that on our future battlefield.
Cool. So Kara, different players in this program are really interesting, right? It's a joint effort. It's OSD led in many ways. How do you think about the landscape? Who were all of the different pieces that you had to engage as part of the Replicator campaign?
So we've been working in partnership with the Army, DIU, and DSD's staff for this. So those are the three players for us anyway. I'm sure other people have different experiences.
Okay. Anything else you want to share or that you're able to share publicly?
No.
It could just be Kara's musings.
My musing. I think my biggest musing is that it's been really exciting to see Replicator getting such attention and support from the industry, and seeing folks start to think about. I think one of the first things I noticed when Replicator came out is that folks started looking at their systems and thinking, I wonder how I can make it cheaper. And that's never been a trend that you've seen in industry, right? It's usually like, how can I make this even more exquisite? How could I make this outperform the competition? And it's really inspired a lot of what can I take off this? That it would still get the mission done, but where nobody's going to be upset when it doesn't come back because it costs X amount of dollars now.
Okay. Well, Kara, then let's end with this. I mean, super grateful for your time today and the insights that you are able to share. And maybe we'll have to have you back when there's more publicly available. Tell us, for folks who are now learning about AeroVironment and excited about the mission and want to be involved, where should they go to learn more and maybe even to consider joining the team?
Sure. So I think we have over 50 positions open currently for hire. The website is avinc.com. You should go there. We have all kinds of videos showing all of our products, downloadable data sheets. You don't even have to put in your email so that you don't get marketing emails forever like you do for some other companies. And you can go there and check it out. We post a lot of fun videos on our LinkedIn page. You can follow the company there. And you can see, I think the last video we just posted was Switchblade 600s detonating against a moving maritime target, which are, that's pretty fun to see. So if you can't be there in person.
Awesome. Well, Kara, listen, congrats again on the win. Thank you for making time to talk to us today. Best of luck in the future, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you.